as ever, we have a title which we don't have to follow at all. We can sort of take it where it goes. The title is Revolutionizing the Gaming Landscape, Exploring Advances in Web3 Games, which I guess we can take where we want, absolutely. But let's do introductions first. So if you can say who you are and sort of what you are up to in this space. Andy, do you want to go first?
Sure, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mugen Interactive. We're a Hong Kong-based game studio that envisions to bring traditional games and the ideas we love and the tactics we know into Web3. So we're launching our first game on Sweden this summer right now with more than 50,000 followers on Twitter in less than 6 months, so we're quite excited.
What was the title of the game? Sorry, did I miss that?
Legend of Arcadia. So I'm actually holding a little pin right here. Legend of Arcadia.
Okay, good.
I got some swag as well if anyone wants it. If not, I have to carry it all the way back to Hong Kong
swag,
afterwards.
So the funds man off the swag. Okay, go on.
Swag's great.
Hey everybody, I'm Matt Nutt. I'm COO of a new company called Fenix Games. We're a Web3 publisher. We're made up of mostly, gaming execs that we've been in the industry for 15, 20 years. I've got lots of experience building games, managing portfolios of game studios, mostly Web 2, excited about all the innovations that we can pursue in the context of design and technology, satisfying unmet needs for gamers with Web 3 tech. So,
and you're based in Dubai as well, is that right?
We're headquartered in Dubai, that's right.
Okay, James Hursthouse, nice to see everybody. I've been in the games industry for about 23 years now. Started off with Nexon in 2000 when I was in Japan. So Jurassic period of MMOs. I was a contributing author to this thing called the Metaverse Roadmap in 2007. And very interesting to see what we got right and what we got wrong. And now running a couple of different companies, one in virtual cinematography actually, which is a sort of adjacent sector doing holographic capture and things like that, more of a metaverse play, bringing humans into digital spaces. Also still involved heavily with a mobile games company called Play Channel. And so I'm here really because I do think Web3 really has a lot of promise for gaming and media in general.
Cool, good. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, we can be free, open, and take it as an open platform. But I guess to kick us off, I guess at the start of the day, I sort of tried to sum up sort of where what we'd seen in 2023 so far, which probably wasn't what we hoped, but that was what it was, and then maybe have a little look at some of the trends that may be pointing towards what I would think a more positive sort of future ahead. But it'd be good to get sort of your views. I mean, Matt, do you want to go first? I guess as you sat in the Web3 space probably for the longest. Should we be surprised at where we are? We had obviously 2021 was the big up year. 2022 was sort of like half good, half bad.
Yeah, I've been in Web3 for 2.5 years. I joined a company called Mythical March of 2020, I think. And it's before NFTs took off. There was a NFT parody on Saturday Night Live. But I joined a company thinking, I'm going to be solving for gray markets in video games, which is a pretty common thing. And suddenly we were just, strapped onto a rocket, holding on for dear life. We expected that it would crash, so I'm not necessarily surprised. I do think we're in for the long haul, right? Like it's going to take a few years for companies like yours and ours to find use cases that allow a gamer to experience a video game in a way that they absolutely can't as a Web 2 product, right? We've got ideas about how to execute against those designs, but I haven't seen anything. Well, we're looking at a lot of interesting things. But ultimately, execution is everything, and we know that it takes time and patience and iteration and innovation to deliver quality games, and we're just not quite there yet.
Patience is not something that blockchain has or a lot of people in blockchain have an enormous affinity for, probably me included. Andy, where do you see the year coming and going?
When I first started building the game just about a year ago, when we launched the studio just last year, and one of the reasons that actually got me out of Tencent, I'm ex-Tencent. If you ever play, I work at Lightspeed. If you ever play PUBG Mobile, that's where our studio is built. So one of the things actually I saw was, it's a bit of deja vu. So just curious, how anyone been here for more than five years in the game industry? Okay, 10? All right. So one of the things I actually saw from Axie was a behavior that I thought was very interesting. I thought when people were playing Axie, it was a way to kill time because there's nothing to do during COVID. So people play Axie during at houses, but it reminded us of the days we used to play games as well as to kill time. But I see things a lot that's interesting right now is, I think we're going down the path where games are becoming more social, where people are going there to socialize with their friends rather than become a new social media. Where people are going, so it reminds me of the days when I actually went to World of Warcraft and played it, not because I wanted to loot and actually get the best armor or best equipment, but to meet people I've never met. I still talk to them. I sell my account, and I still talk to them since today. It's the same with mobile. So I joined Tencent when Honor of Kings, which Arena of Valor was just before launch. So I was part of the development and actually saw what happened as well too. A lot of it reminded me of deja vu of what happened. What happened afterwards was because people play Honor of Kings because it's not Honor of Kings, because it's not MOBA, but because all their friends are playing it, so they all went in there to socialize. I feel Web3 games is we're just at that beginning where people are willing to play games just for the sake of social, and that will actually bring a lot more use cases and actually bring mass adoption. So we are quite excited by that, which we're doing this in our games as well.
James, I guess you have a sort of slightly, you're not in the day-to-day of Web3 like probably the rest of us are, so you have maybe more sort of a heads-up view. I mean, as you look at it, how do you see what's going on as much as you look at sort of Web3 day-to-day? Do you think the industry is looking at the right things, or is it sort of slightly sort of, we're looking at this and then suddenly something happens and we're looking over here and there's a sort of slight lack of consistency of what we're trying to do? Yeah,
no, I think what's interesting is how sort of Web3 has become synonymous only with blockchain, and yet I think Web3 is a sort of broader set of technologies. And from our perspective, what we're seeing that's really interesting is actually how a lot of not only blockchain, but also other components can actually aid creators, potentially not more than players, but certainly in a different way. And I think the idea of a creatorverse where we have interoperability of, for example, assets in movies. Recently, there was an interesting project that was done in the UK using volumetric capture technology where they captured all of the crowd for the Whitney Houston biopic. And so 300 people came in, did the performance, and now that crowd exists as 3D models ready for utilization, right? So they basically did the entire crowd scene in post. In that particular case, they haven't yet minted those assets for other people to use in crowd scenes, but I can really see a future in which across gaming, cross-media future, as we start to drive feature retail, this idea that there is these resources available potentially on-chain for the creation of gaming. And I think, that started to emerge with some of the ideas of the interoperability around different game assets. And I don't think the industry's really cracked that yet. I think the sort of broader population thinks, why would I need this emerald sword of ultimate power from this game and be able to take it over into that game? And my experience was it's very difficult to design game economies anyway, never mind designing one that's going to be sort of this meta economy across multiple titles. And so our approach really, initially, at least from the day job at Departure Lounge, is looking at it more from the perspective of reutilizable assets in the creation side, and then really the promise of cross-media as we move into this immersive generation of the internet rather than necessarily viewing content through screens. We'll be inside that content, right? So broader than just blockchain and NFTs, I think.
Cool. Matt, at Fenix, you're sort of, I think you are a publisher, that's what you say you are. Web3 sort of blurs the edges. So I guess you're looking at a lot of content that's out there, as publishers would do, and sort of working out exactly how you would want to sort of work with some of these things. What sort of trends are you seeing in terms of, I guess in 2021, Axie was the hit, and everyone basically said, Axie is the way to do it, but make a better game. So we've sort of seen how that's played out. That didn't really solve anything. Do you think that the sort of designers are, how are they becoming more nuanced in the sort of, they have a large tool set in which they can use? There's probably no exactly right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
There's a little bit about how you implement it. But
yeah, we look at a lot of games, right? And I would say there's quite a bit of content in the Web3 space that's being made by teams that they're making their first game, right? I think in the last probably 12 to 18 months, I personally am excited about lots of seasoned, qualified Web2 teams coming into the space, right? I like talking to them, and I like the experiments that they're looking to validate because they've got very, very specific things that they're trying to solve for, right? So what I like to see is a game team with subgenre expertise in a particular type of game They've made that game a couple of times. They've had the joy of scaling a game and dealing with a mature economy, and that's interesting to us because they're coming into Web3 with a very specific use case, possibly around, well, I want to make a game where I would, traditionally reset the economy on an annual basis, but I'm interested in building a product whereby I'm pushing some of the economic value out to the community as opposed to holding it for myself as a developer or my publisher to see basically what that might do to engagement. It's an extension of what Manish was talking about earlier on this stage. So that's exciting. And we can see that those teams are 6+ months into development on their products. And so I think in the next 6 to 18 months, we're going to see more of those types of games coming to market where they are solving for a pretty specific use case in context of a decade worth of Web 2 experience. That's exciting. Yeah.
And Andy, as a game developer, how did you think about, I want to make a game, I want to have some blockchain Web3 elements, how you describe it? It's not a magic bullet. What exactly how are you exactly trying to use it? When you think about the vision of what you were trying to do, and has that changed?
So my core purpose is to build liquidity. My view is that a lot of times, and you guys can kill me for saying this, because every time I say this, everyone looks at me with a really weird stare, is that I don't think players really care about ownership. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree.
Because ultimately, ownership is something look, they can own it, but will they actually take a look at it again and again and again? They won't, right? They won't. There'll always be something new for them to look after, and they'll just forget about what they had. That's just human behavior. So what we're trying to do is build liquidity. This is why we are the fundamental crux of how we're building our games is focus on what are some of the games that's really siloed today, and something that there's going to be a lot of items or things that you don't need, and how do we build liquidity out of that on a massive scale? So turning NFTs as a way of tokenizing it rather than actually issuing token. So as an example, right, Legend of Arcadia is an idle-based card game. Why do we pick card games? Is really simply you're going to get gadget boxes, you're going to get loot boxes, and you're going to get cards that you never will ever use. Why don't you just give it away or just put it elsewhere? However, if you actually put it on the marketplace, it's not that interesting. So what we did actually, we included a merge model where it actually forces people to actually buy a bunch of cards on the marketplace and actually turn into something where your skins on your NFT are randomized. So we want them to turn randomized skin into something of the same series. That would mean you need to go to the marketplace, buy the cards of the same series, merge them together, and actually try to turn it from something randomized into wholesome. So that would create liquidity on the items that you probably don't need. Now, so we're trying to take these tactics that we understand, or just experiments, trying to play with it.
Interesting use case.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to explain maybe for people who don't know. So when you're saying liquidity, basically you're saying that you're having these assets and basically players are forced to trade with other players to get the things they need. So you're sort of trading becomes sort of a gameplay loop.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely makes sense. Although I would say I would be someone, maybe the other panelists wouldn't be, I would be someone who would sort of kick back a little bit on your view that players don't care about ownership. I mean, obviously they clearly do care about some items, and even in your game, basically what you're saying is, you're going to get a lot of cards, and most of them you're going to basically swap for the things you want to make. You want a few high-powered things rather than a lot of low-powered things in terms of your game. But I would say even beyond that, I mean, I got into the space in 2018, and a lot of the stuff I have then is literally worthless now, which is fine. But I still have some, psychological pleasure in looking back at that initial wallet I had, and I've got a Gen 0 crypto kitty, and I've got a few crypto kitties I tried to breed for about 2 weeks, and and that sort of stuff. I think it may not have commercial value, and it may not have massive nostalgia value to me. But I think one of the things that probably will come out of the long term is owning wallets that everyone can see every transaction that's gone through that. People are already trying to build out sort of reputation systems around that. That will take a long time, but you sort of will have those sort of things where I think ownership sort of will matter and actions will matter, and the fact that those are in a public blockchain will actually be pretty important to community. And you'll start to see there may be people who have millions of dollars worth of tokens in a game, but because they've seen as flipping something earlier in it may not be the high level value of stuff they own. It may be their reputation further on. There's something happening in the game, and they were seen as taking
That's fair, right?
flip.
There are new cohorts of end users that we can invite into a game experience by virtue of ownership, right? Not everybody cares about ownership, right? There's applications of design principles rooted in decentralized technology. There's a lot of other things that we can do, right? You're interested in a particular use case of the technology, but yeah, there will always be a subset of the audience, and this is a new audience for video game developers like us who are interested in ownership, right? And what sort of emergent engagement might result out of that. That's what's most fascinating to us is we want to work with talented developers who are designing games where they've got a thesis on emergent play, and they're just trying to basically, right, create a game where there's some sort of catalyst to facilitate a thesis on some sort of emergent play. Ownership, I think, is going to be one of many aspects that possibly, right, that act as enzymes to facilitate emergent play. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where actually, going back to the idea of Web3 being broader than simply just chain NFT, I think user-generated content is a key piece, and not only the creation of assets, but also the creation of gameplay mechanic and things like that, right? So how do you encourage those emergent behaviors to start to flourish? And I think, figuring out the incentive and the reward for people to do that in a meaningful way will bring about gameplay systems that we probably hadn't anticipated as creators, but had planted the seeds to be able to have them emerge, right? So I agree with you completely.
And in fact, continuing that point, extending it, the interesting bit about certainly open blockchains is that obviously third parties can come in and look at the data and build entirely different lateral subsystems based on that. And obviously, as ever, most of those things won't work or find sort of product market fit. And but you will, as has been mentioned several times already in this panel, sort of user-generated content is a pretty much a big thing that every big gaming system now is using to some degree because it's clearly sticky and it contains the audience. And as soon as you add sort of value into that with blockchain, then you start to at least have these the optionality there. That all that historic data is there to be used at some point if someone wants to do it for maybe only one game. That's really the possibilities on that are sort of endless and interesting. And taking the point one step further, I'm still trying to process the talk about generative AI, but there is one thing that I think, again, is interesting around that is there's been a few articles I've read that have spoken about, how AI and sort of blockchain tokens work really well together because AI is going to be doing useful work, productive work in the economy. AIs can't get bank accounts, we assume. So AIs are going to have crypto wallets. And then the whole process is AIs are going to start creating their own cryptocurrencies and blockchains to pay themselves, and you're going to have this. We're getting sort of way off into sort of.
That's
Narnia,
the future. That's the future.
But it is quite interesting because AIs will be creating blockchains and then running games that they can be.
Well,
NPCs
how else are they going to fund Skynet, right? I mean, it's like.
But that's my work. Okay, so if any of this is, anyone has any questions, if any of this is sparking anything off, please feel free to stick your hand up. Good. Okay, let's stop me talking then. Hold on.
Actually, I was going to say generative AI is actually not my biggest fear. My biggest fear is my daughter dating generative AI. That's actually my biggest fear out of it.
Just taking you off.
Okay, for sure.
My.
Hi, guys. Hi, I'm Cole from Checkout.com. So I had a question about actually in-game purchasing. So there's a lot of trends in say Fortnite. They're doing concerts with Travis Scott and different events like that. I want to know as you're creating new games, do you take that into consideration? And do you see different trends in in-game purchasing? Maybe even digital wallets inside of your games or things like that. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Anyone want to jump on that?
Yeah, I mean, I view the Travis Scott event as a marketing event for a game that's now many years old and has probably experimented with a live content, live services roadmap, right? I think Fortnite's wonderful because it's a game with, it's a very simple mode. It's very engaging. Their battle pass, right? That's really the innovation I think that's most remarkable about what Fortnite did. It's a social construct where you can go hang out with friends. There's only one winner at the end of a match. that would usually churn out everyone else, but their battle pass basically gave a reason for people to engage over an extended period of time, and they do seasonal resets, and they license IP, right, so that you want to chase the new Marvel characters. I think I recently saw the new Spider-Verse movie, right, so those are new skins that you can chase. So Travis Scott and those types of events, those feel like very clever marketing tactics for sure. It's just another reason for, I think, the community to log in and engage. Yeah, that's what pops in my head. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So great presentation yesterday, by the way. It was really informative. So, the TikTok stuff, it was really good. So I did some research because I did a symposium at the University of Leeds on last Friday about music in the metaverse and looked quite deeply into Travis Scott, and actually more Marshmello than Travis Scott because there was more data available. And I think actually it was an interesting scenario because in many ways I think it was a really good bidirectional, mutually beneficial marketing activity, because if you look at the uptick, particularly for Marshmello, there was some crazy data around like 1,800% uptick on YouTube channels. The number of searches on Songkick went up by about 370%. So sort of coming with a little bit of a music background, we started to try and apply those metrics to say, okay, well, if it's the right audience and you can reach that new audience through Fortnite, what uptick would you see in your non-kind of gaming-focused metrics, right? It was quite interesting stuff. And the real conclusion that we drew on Friday was the key advantage is that Fortnite already had the audience with the client installed, because if you don't and you're trying to stream those kinds of experiences, then the monetization just doesn't work, right? There's no business model if you don't have that installed base. And so I think sort of to answer the question about why wouldn't you as a game designer, if you know, not that you ever would, but if you did anticipate that you were going to have 20, 30 million clients out there, then in a way, why wouldn't you want to start to explore some of those opportunities rather than sort of relying on streaming and some of the more expensive distribution mechanisms? So I think we'll see a lot more of it. I think, Pentakill in League of Legends was a really interesting one when they did the launch for that album. And really then I think it all just comes down to whether there's a demographic fit between that gamer audience and whatever else it is that you're trying to promote within there. But the symbiotic relationship between music and gaming, I think, will carry on. And the existence of the client and having that client is really a massive advantage, at least in the next sort of 5 years until we all figure out some ubiquitous kind of high-performance cloud.
So your point on that is it's too expensive to stream just a web. You have
too expensive to stream. So I mean, to give you some data, it's probably about 50 cents to $1 an hour per player to do reasonably good high-quality VR streaming or even streaming at all at the moment. And, it's pretty difficult to monetize an audience at $1 an hour. And that's before you even have licensing fees or mechanical sync or anything. Just the cost of the cloud, we sort of calculated out as a minimum of 50 cents an hour per player. So tough to monetize with ads, right?
Cool, good. Okay, if people have other questions, put your hands up. I guess going back to sort of blockchain game and this year, I guess one of the sort of biggest sort of news points certainly recently has been sort of SEC moving in the US, sort of expected to some degree, but still pretty ballsy for them to go after Binance and Coinbase in the same week. But it almost seems like that has to some degree been a relief. But I wonder if that's just my take on it. I don't know if where are you based? Are you based in the US?
Thankfully, no.
No, you're not. Okay. So yeah, do people think that's a good thing, a bad thing in the short term? Should we just actually is it sort of meaningless?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of grifters in the Web3 space, right? And so to the extent that these types of policies weed that out, I think that's good for everybody in this room, everyone in this convention hall. I think it's short-sighted on the part of the SEC. What I do worry about is talented innovators who have the capability and appetite to pursue new insights, new experiences might be turned off, right, by the possibility and potential of doing interesting things because of really ambiguity, right? That would be a bummer, right? Like we've talked to a couple of developers who still want to make blockchain games and they want to do NFTs, but they're not sure they want to do a token now. Like, that's a bummer, right? I think it would be a significant loss if the innovation is marginalized just to non-fungible tokens. So,
Isn't it good for jurisdictions like Dubai?
sure. Yes.
So Andy, where are you based?
I'm in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So I don't know if you guys know, but Hong Kong just went all in Web3 starting last year, and they released regulation to give out licenses similar to how Dubai is giving out VASPs here. So the funny is a lot of my friends have been starting to move there, ask me three things: where should they live, where should their office be, and where should the kids go to school. So, but I think this is where I think the next wave of Web3 will actually the growth will actually come from Asia. Because part of the is the new regulations that's coming up, not just in the U.S. but globally in different places. But more importantly, I think U.S. had a head start, and I've been reading different surveys that the head start the U.S. had is diminishing relative to other places in the world as well. So, especially Asian developers are actually quite swift. They're quite rapid. They work really hard and actually can get things out and shipped much faster than I've seen with a lot of US developers as well. So I think that from a game perspective, do see a lot of growth in Asia. But the funny thing is about the SEC though, I actually don't think it's a bad thing, to be honest. And I have a thesis. So I asked my friends last April, right before Luna incident happened, I asked them, hey, when do you think the next bull market will come? And then they said July this year. I asked them again July. Right before 3 Arrows actually went down, they were like, still July this year. And I asked them early this year, so guys, is it July this year? Half of them still say yes. So, but one of the things that I actually said was that they're waiting for the SEC to put their foot down to see what's going to happen. Especially, a lot of them actually felt SBF got off a little bit too easily. Now, so I don't want to get into political side of things, but then I think this whole SEC debacle that they had and is actually the last piece of the puzzle, and everyone actually had a relief and said, okay, then life can go on and we can just all start moving on. Yeah, at least that's my feeling. I don't know if James, you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to sort it through, because if you think back, I mean, not quite to the same scale, but in the early days of free-to-play, when we all had comp gacha and there was like 6 layers of gacha machine and there was all of these kind of nefarious practices, I mean, there was a lot of vitriol leveled towards comp gacha free-to-play, and at one point it was sort of vilified as the worst thing ever. But now I don't think really there is a digital experience that wasn't influenced in some way by the practices of free-to-play. So I've always sort of seen what's been going on with, DeFi, crypto, NFT is sort of going through that necessary phase of skepticism, and I think that you're correct in that now that somebody will come in. The problem is it's like taking a sledgehammer to a quite intricate problem, and that's the problem that we face. I think that technology moves faster than the legislation and the jurisdiction can keep up with. But that aside, I think it's a good dialogue to just make sure that there are fair practices, and I think the same thing that happened with free-to-play after it came through its trough of disappointments happening right now, right? So, yeah.
And I guess equally, I think something we're particularly prone to in crypto, with prices being available 24/7, is causation and correlation are just all over the place. So because if something happens in the price, then everyone's like, well, that happened because, and so I think you have two narratives. One is sort of news, and one is how important that news is based on does it affect the price. But the price goes up and down all over the place, as we've sort of seen over the last 2 days. Not very clear why the price has all gone up 20%, but it has. So it's sort of one of those weird things. Okay. So we're going to get back on time. So just, I guess, another sort of 5 minutes. So how do we see sort of the rest of 2023 playing out? Is it going to be these sort of broader sort of themes around, people being taken to court and regulation sort of slowly coming in, and that sort of stuff having to be worked out at a sort of a high level, and we don't really expect much fundamentally to be changing? And really now we're looking for games coming out in early 2024 to be the driver, or do we think there are any sort of products coming out this year, or any reasons why we think we could be a bit more positive about the next 6 months? Go on, James.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, Q's presentation this morning talking about Summoner's War Chronicles, I think that's a major thing where, it's sort of like almost the Trojan horse released as Web 2, and then slowly over time, without really letting on, the Web3 components start to come in a major game like that. And I think the industry will look at that and go, okay, well, in the same way that Summoner's War had thousands of copycat games anyway. I think the same thing will happen. I mean, particularly if you're starting to get platforms like XPLA and, the one that we mate's working on, a ton of other things, right? I think those tools are there now. And I think the industry should just shut up about the sort of technology and the jargon and just get on with doing it. And then over time, people will be playing Web3 games before they know it. And it's like, hey, there we go, right? It's I think it's all the technology that's really, at the moment, it's an impediment rather than a help. So I think there are games coming even in the next couple of quarters where we will see a big sea change towards quality from the really strong developers,
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I missed Q's talk this morning, but WeMix and WeMate are doing the same thing, right? Mirror 4, I was on a panel with Juanil recently in Pasadena, and he shared, data points around, I forget how many concurrent users are engaged in that game right now, but 70% of the players haven't reached the elder player part of the game where they're interacting with anything on chain yet, and it's designed that way on purpose, and it's still a significant driver of revenue, but right, the game's design isn't solely reliant on blockchain, and I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because somebody was saying earlier about how the regulator only plays the first 20 minutes, and if you don't get to the chain bit, then there's no problem, right?
I actually am excited for a few games my friends are building that's going to launch towards the end of the year. And a lot of them are actually SLGs. A lot of SLGs are coming out towards the end of the year. A lot of more kind of mid-core games are coming out I've seen in the market. I think it's really diversification of the games and different products that's going to come out throughout the next 6 months that will get people quite excited. And a lot of them actually tone down narrative on Earn. It's really about just having that experience, that immersive experience, and that social aspect they've been looking for. A lot of games have been looking for the past 2 years since the term GameFi was coined. So I think there's going to be a lot of new genres and just kind of re-educate people what is truly what Web3 can do and actually why they should be excited about.
I think for me it's sort of an interesting sort of situation that lots of blockchain games I see are on a spectrum of sort of blockchainness or whatever term we want to use, and there's a lot of sort of really cool on-chain stuff, which is just like sort of blows your brains to try and work out how you'd even play the game, but it's sort of quite fascinating how there's fully on-chain games, they're pretty niche, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there, but clearly it's never going to go mass market. It's more like a place to experiment. And then as Q said, and as Wanli said, those games are sort of going out as not standard games, and then when you get to a certain stage, you sort of the Web3 stuff unlocks, and that's almost like the exact opposite. And there's no right or wrong way of doing that, and it's they apply to different audiences. But I think probably maybe something in the middle will be maybe the sweet spot. I don't know. I think the only problem I have, not problem, but because I'm so into blockchain, I sometimes think giving people Web2 games and then going and here's a bit of Web3 isn't quite exciting enough, but maybe that I'm probably over-indexing on the blockchain.
It's a pretty significant spread, right? Like in contrast to mobile, right? Which, what is that, 15 years at this point? And I churned out of mobile after over a decade because the conventional best practices of how to do that relatively well are pretty well known, and IDFA just blew everything up, right? But like, it's boring, right? I think Web3, we're firmly in the experimenting and in the white space and trying to solve a bunch of solutions. So the spectrum of projects that we see, it's all over the place, and that's fun. And to the extent that we can put our weight behind a variety of projects in pursuit of commercial outcomes, but also insights that help move the sector forward, that's what we like.
Yeah, and I do think there's going to be some interesting stuff in sort of physical-digital relationship. I think, to go back to the Web3 word and the broader use of that, metaverse, obviously not the most voguish word right now, but I think a lot of people's experience of the first time they experience metaverse is going to be physical digital interaction and sort of driving feet to retail, and how do you get people in through a digital experience and then monetize them in the real world, for example. And I think obviously blockchain's got a lot of application and being able to track that from proof of attendance protocols and various other things, right? So I'm really excited about stuff that's going on where we're really looking at how I mean, Play Channel's called Play Channel because it's supposed to be the channel through which people enter, and then, we keep track of that user through multiple iterations of their LTV across digital and into the real world, right? And so I think there's going to be some exciting stuff around that as you start to see more genuine applications of the mixed reality metaverse come to fruition. And, that'll be exciting as well, because I think a lot of that needs to be managed on-chain with smart contracts and, royalty distributions to different folks and things like that, right? So, around the corner.
Good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much to our panelists. Yeah, good, yeah. Round of applause. Excellent. Thank you very much.